Welcome to the UK Travel Planning Podcast. Your host is the founder of the UK Travel Planning website, Tracy Collins. In this podcast, Tracy shares destination guides, travel tips, and itinerary ideas, as well as interviews with a variety of guests who share their knowledge and experience of UK travel to help you plan your perfect UK vacation. Join us as we explore the UK from cosmopolitan cities to quaint villages, from historic castles to beautiful islands, and from the picturesque countryside to seaside towns.
Okay, and welcome to the UK Travel Planning Podcast. This week I've got guest Karen back again to talk about all things British food. We recently did a podcast live, or I did that with Victoria in the Facebook group, and we've got lots and lots of questions about foods. So myself and Karen have been chatting away, and we decided we would do a little bit of a podcast and have a chat about the foods that we enjoy eating when we're in the UK, and give you a little bit of context about what sort of things that you can expect when you're there. A little bit about pubs, a little bit about how to save money as well when you're in the UK, because food, eating out is pretty expensive, and if you're trying to budget, there are things that you can do. Also, the fact that there are different names for different foods in the UK as well. So I thought I'd kick off. Would you like to just say hello? Sorry, Karen.
Hey, I'm Karen. So yeah, we've done a couple of podcasts before as well, haven't we? So we just thought we've got so much to say about food, so it felt like a podcast on its own. But we went back to the UK for a visit. So just to give you the background, I'm from the UK originally and now live in Australia, and I've been over in Brisbane for about 8.5 years now. And last year, in September and October, we went back to the UK for 6 weeks, myself, my husband and 3 kids, to travel around and see family and catch up with everybody. And it seemed we ate all the food while we were away, because my husband's a bit of a food obsessed. He really missed a lot of food in the UK. So we did a lot of eating of a lot of different food in a lot of different places. And actually, it was where nearly all of our money went, was on food.
Oh, I know. It is definitely expensive. And actually, so I've just recorded a previous podcast with Karen, which I will link to in the show notes, because I'm not quite sure at this point which episode that'll be, but there will be a link to listen to Karen talk all about her 6-week trip back to the UK with her family last October. And also, if you do recognise Karen's voice, it's probably because she is the person who does the intro to the podcast too. So let's start talking about food, because I love food as well.
It could be a long podcast.
Yeah, it could be. So I think the first thing, let's talk about the sort of foods you might find when you visit the UK. So what you're going to find are that there are regional variations, so specialities to different regions. So I grew up in the northeast of the UK, so in Northumberland. I grew up very much on my grandmother's home cooking. She used to make her own bread. So, and she used to have exactly the same food at exactly the same day of the week. So she followed a very regimental structure. She also had 4 small meals a day with my grandfather. So I kind of grew up in that culture in the kind of late 60s and 70s. So, I absolutely love any of the foods that she used to make. So I'll start with one of my favorites when I'm back is have a roast dinner. So a Sunday roast is a big tradition, isn't it, Karen?
Yeah, every single Sunday growing up. And even now, my mum and dad still every Sunday make a roast, even though it's just the 2 of them. They'll get like a little mini roast now that they make. But you can have roasts in pubs. You can have carveries in pubs where you've got all of the roast meat laid out and all the vegetables, and you can kind of keep your plate as high as it can go. But Sunday roast, it was something that was a non-negotiable in our house.
Absolutely. I think actually Doug would be happy if I made a roast dinner every Sunday. Yeah, it's a bit too hot, so I don't. Absolutely. So I know it was something I was discussing with Wendy in I think podcast 32. If she was over in the UK, she found it really difficult to find a Sunday roast. I think it's worth, if you go to a carvery, they probably will be on all day. But generally, if you're going into a pub or a restaurant for a Sunday carvery, it tends to be a lunchtime thing, so it'll finish generally about 4. And you will potentially, I would book, to be honest, because it is a popular thing and people will go out with their family, meet up to have a Sunday roast. So if you're going to be in a popular destination in the UK, then I would consider definitely making some inquiries and booking a Sunday roast if that's what you want to do.
And the most important part of the Sunday roast has to be Yorkshire pudding.
Absolutely.
It has to be Yorkshire pudding because I'm from Yorkshire, so it's just something that we grew up with and it is delicious.
I have Yorkshire pudding. Yeah, I absolutely love Yorkshire pudding with it. I've had sausage and mash and I have to have Yorkshire pudding. So if you're in York, what you can also do, I'll put that, we'll just mention this as well. And I know we mentioned in podcast number 3 when we talk about York, is if you're in York, you can have a Yorkshire pudding wrap. Which is, it's basically your Sunday dinner in a huge Yorkshire pudding that you fold over and you eat that. Oh, it's delicious. And I know lots of people have stopped off and have a Yorkshire pudding wrap when they've been in York.
My kids were literally asking me if I can make that for them yesterday.
Oh,
so
really?
I haven't tried making it at home yet, but yeah, I don't know whether it's a northern thing, but we used to have Yorkshire pudding with any roast. Traditionally, It goes with roast beef, but my family do it with whether it's chicken, pork, whatever the meat is that you're having, it always has to come with Yorkshire pudding.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't matter. Yeah, I know the traditional thing is that it's with roast beef, but actually most people will have it with any. And you can have a large Yorkshire pudding or make smaller Yorkshire puddings. There is a bit of an art to making Yorkshire pudding, which basically once you've got the batter mixed, you've got to make sure that the fat, which you've put in the oven, is red hot. So you bring it out, put the batter mix in and put it in, and then your Yorkshire puddings will rise. That is what my mother has told me is the secret.
It's easy. It's equal quantities of plain flour, milk and eggs whisked up till it's smooth, bit of salt and pepper, and in a really red hot oven.
Yeah.
And I can say that because I'm from Yorkshire. So
yes, you can.
I make good Yorkshire puddings.
Absolutely. I have to say that my grandmother made the best Yorkshire puddings ever. She really did. And I still miss those. I can still taste those wonderful Yorkshire puddings. So another thing you'll find across the UK, kind of not a regional thing, you'll just find everywhere really, is good fish and chips. Fish and chip shops everywhere for takeaway. There used to be when I was a kid, you'd get them wrapped up in newspaper, but I think that got stopped a few years ago. So you'll still get them wrapped around in paper though, and they'll ask if you want your salt and vinegar on. They'll ask about if you can always ask for scraps as well. Do you want to explain what they are?
So scraps, again, there's some places have regional words for this, but scraps are like the little bits of batter that are broken off, and they give you a big scoop of them on top of your chips, and they're really bad for you, but really good.
Really delicious.
So some places call them, because I grew up, I was born in Sheffield in South Yorkshire, and then I grew up in Lincoln, and I've kind of hung around with people that say varying words, and then I moved down south. So I've heard words of scraps, bits and scrumps are words that I've heard for them. But I tend to go for scraps or bits as the most likely. I think scrumps is more of a Lincolnshire word.
Right, okay.
But they are really good. You can ask for those. They're free on top of chips. While we're talking about fish and chips, something that I forgot to mention in the previous podcast when we were talking about that we did around the UK, we made the effort to go to a tiny fish and chip shop in Lincolnshire called Upton Fish and Chip Shop. It only opens twice a week for a couple of hours. It's this really tiny, quaint little village in the middle of nowhere, and they've got this really ancient coal-fired fish and chip shop where the chips are cut by hand in front of you, and you queue up at this tiny little cubicle doorway to order your food, and there's quite a wait sometimes to get it, but it's a really unique experience. And we took the kids there, and it was great fun to just do it just for the experience.
I bet they really enjoyed it. And it's if you go for things like the takeaways like fish and chips, they're not overly expensive. I can't off the top of my head think now the prices, and I will check when I'm over in the UK, but it is a cheaper meal to go and get a takeaway, something like fish and chips. And certainly something a traditional thing to do if you're a seaside resort, for sure. Just watch out for seagulls.
Yes, that happened to me once when we were, I think we were in Weymouth, and I had this, we just bought a really lovely big tray of fish and chips, and I was sitting on a bench, and a seagull came over my shoulder and took the whole piece of fish.
Wow.
And kind of took it, picked it up and threw it on the floor in front of me, and then hundreds of seagulls came down.
I can imagine.
And so now I'm very paranoid about chips outside.
Yeah, you have to be, because they're huge as well. The seagulls are massive, so you have to be really careful. Even like if you've got an ice cream, you have to be careful with seagulls. There's usually signs actually saying, I think I remember in St. Ives, all these signs said, beware of the seagulls. So another kind of head up towards Scotland, which is kind of, I lived on the border of Scotland, is one of my favourite foods when I'm back is to have haggis, neeps and tatties. So obviously haggis, I'm not going to tell you what it is. Tatties, potatoes, and neeps is turnip. So if you get a chance, if you're in Edinburgh, my favourite place to go is Macca's Gourmet Mash Bar. They do a small portion of haggis, neeps and tatties, which is delicious. And I recommend that to everybody. So even if you just try it when you're over, if it's, I won't talk about what actually haggis is.
I've never tried it.
Have you not? No, it's absolutely delicious. And a lot of people have tried it and said, they really enjoyed it. So something worth trying. Another favourite in the UK is a fried breakfast, a full English breakfast, or in Scotland, a full Scottish. So with a full Scottish, you'll potentially get a bit of haggis and some oat cakes. If full English as well, you'll get a black pudding or white pudding. Again, I won't discuss what they're made of.
Not always. What I mean is you don't always get those.
Oh, you don't? No.
Thankfully, because I think they're horrible. But my husband loves them, and he will sometimes add them to a full English.
Yes.
But they're not on every.
No, you might get offered that. There might be a potential to have that. Yeah, because if you're staying in a B&B, you might not get those. It's, you'll usually get your sausage, egg, tomato, beans, fried bread, kind of stick mushrooms. Those are the staples of a fried breakfast. With those additions of potentially the oat cakes and haggis, black pudding, white pudding. But if you get the chance again, if try it if you want to. So we talked a bit about carveries because I mentioned about Sunday roast. So a carvery is a great. Often they're also like a pub carvery. So a pub will have a carvery attached to it. So a carvery it's a bit more kind of relaxed where you can go and you kind of help yourself to the vegetables, but they will carve up the meat. Hence the name carvery. So again, usually very child friendly. Those sort of places, I know I've been a lot. So they've got kind of, places for kids to play as well in those sort of pubs. So I know talking about pub meals, I kind of guess from that as well, is you can go, pub meals, basically fish and chips, gammon steak and chips, scampi and chips,
lasagna, maybe pasta dish.
Yeah.
They've got, I find that they do a really good variety of meals on the pub menus in the UK.
Yeah.
There's definitely things that are on their menus that aren't on the menus generally here. Like you'd get you might get a risotto, or you might get a pasta dish, or you might get, as I say, lasagna or something that you don't necessarily always get on the pub menus in Australia.
Yeah, that's true. So usually quite a large variety of those, and you'll have a bar that you can go and get a drink or alcoholic drink from as well.
And quite often you'll take your table number and go to the bar to order the food. Sometimes they might have waiting service as well, that they might do that. But most of the time with a pub, you just take the number of your table and you go to the bar to order it. They might have a different corner of the bar that's just for food, and it usually will have a sign above it saying order food here or something. But if not, just go to the bar and just ask about ordering food with whoever's serving behind the bar.
Yeah, and if you're, again, in a smaller place, you might need to inquire about booking it, especially at weekends. I know when we were in Cornwall last year, we went to a pub restaurant for a really good meal. But again, we struggled to make sure that we could get in because they were quite busy. Other popular dishes in the UK that I found is curry. I'm not a massive curry fan.
I love curry.
Do you like curry?
Curry's my favourite, and we really miss a good British Indian curry.
Yeah.
Like it does taste different in Australia. It's just, we really enjoy it. So you've got lots of actual curry houses there, but they'll often put curry on the menu of a pub as well.
Yes, they'll have a curry night as well. So you can often go and they'll have, for a reasonable price, they'll have a choice of different curries. And obviously there's lots of also takeaway restaurants in the UK, so takeaways, so Chinese takeaways, Indian takeaways, the fish and chip takeaways. So you can always just go and order pizzas as well. You can get on takeaway. And I know somebody the other day asked me about an app, so I need to have a look at that, which would be the best app to have a look at for kind of just finding out about restaurants, what's an area.
Actually, that's interesting. When we were travelling, we ended up spending a night in LA on our way back. And we used Uber Eats to order food to our hotel.
Oh, wow.
We found that was quite helpful, just to be able to just grab some dinner. And if you've got the Uber app anyway,
yes,
you can just have a look at it and you can plug in from what location, and you can have a look at what restaurants are around in the nearby area. So that
if you want to takeaway, that's useful to know. what other things? I guess bangers and mash, mentioned before, bangers and mash with gravy. So gravy's a big thing as well in the UK.
My kid's favourite, toad in the hole.
Yes.
Which isn't really a toad in a hole.
Do you want to explain what that is?
So it's sausages cooked in a big Yorkshire pudding. So like usually in like a big square tin, and then you chop it up in slices and serve it with mashed potato and gravy. Although maybe it's a weird southern thing, but my husband and his family have it with baked beans.
That's a weird southern thing.
I think it's a weird southern because I think
baked
that's
beans.
It's got to be with gravy. Not with beans.
Yeah, gravy definitely. I don't know again because I'm northern that we certainly like our sauces and gravies.
Yes,
more so I think than well, I'll probably be controversial, but from people from the south of England, I would say so.
Right, because I would say I'm northern too, and my husband's from the south coast, so we have different ways with our foods. But toad in the hole is a big favourite.
Definitely. And then so then we've also got things, if you pop into Greg's Bakery is probably the biggest chain of bakeries where you can pop in and get takeaways. So you can get your bacon butty. So you can get a bacon sandwich in the UK. I know somebody was saying that they found it really difficult. But honestly, bacon butty, go to Greg's. Really, if you go to any greasy, I'm going to call it Greasy Spoon Cafe as well. That's what they're called. Where you're having a breakfast, you should be able to order a bacon sandwich. Bacon roll, bacon bap, whatever you're going to call it, but we'll talk about that in a second.
I was going to say more market venues might call it a bacon sandwich.
Yes,
bacon butty.
Yes, and also you get HB brown sauce in the UK. So obviously there's ketchup, so tomato sauce is popular, but also brown sauce. HP sauce, brown sauce, which I personally prefer. Doug always says tomato ketchup, but I like my brown. That's a northern thing as well, though.
You see, I don't do brown sauce. Matt does brown sauce.
Really?
So I do ketchup. Yeah.
Okay. So if you get a chance, try brown sauce. And then obviously things like pork pies, sausage rolls, Scotch eggs you can get.
These are my husband's absolute all-time favourite foods that you're mentioning all right there.
Yeah.
Things he lived on while we were travelling around. It was just, every time we stopped anywhere, he'd turn around and he'd be in a baker's buying a Scotch egg, some cheese straws, some sausage rolls, and a pork pie.
Well, it can't beat honestly, pork pie is lovely. And then, so should we explain what a Scotch egg is?
Go on, you do.
Okay, so a Scotch egg is basically, it's a hard-boiled egg, and it's wrapped around with mincemeat so that it's round. And then it's dipped in breadcrumbs and then it's fried. And it's delicious, absolutely delicious.
It's served cold.
And it's served cold, yeah. But honestly, absolutely delicious with a bit of brown sauce.
I'm spotting a trend here.
Yeah. So if you get a chance to try Scotch egg, you'll find that again all over the UK. It's pretty, it's pretty, I don't know if it comes from Scotland because it's called Scotch egg. Maybe it does, but it's pretty popular, like pork pies, bacon buddies, sausage rolls. And then if you're going to, obviously down to Cornwall, Cornish pasty.
Yeah. Well, while we were travelling, Matt made it his mission to have a Cornish pasty everywhere because even though they obviously originate from Cornwall, you can get them all over the place. But he really did feel that the best ones were from the ones in Cornwall that he had. But he did try them everywhere just to make sure. But he did find a really good Cornish pasty shop at Gunwharf Quays in Portsmouth.
Uh-huh.
And I think there might be a chain of them.
All right.
Something like the Cornish pasty.
I think so. I have a feeling Doug had one in Bath, actually. So they're interesting because part of my ancestry is from Cornwall. I always find it quite interesting about the Cornish pasties used to be for the men to take down the tin mines. So the fact that you've got like a thick out edge, which is kind of scalloped, I guess is the best way to describe it, is what the men would hold to eat the pasty because they'd have arsenic on their hands. So to stop them getting poisoned because they couldn't wash their hands when they're down the mines. They would use the thick crust and hold on to the actual pasty. And one half of the pasty used to be savoury and the other half used to be sweet.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So you'd get the meat and the veg, and then on the other side you might get a bit of apple. So you'd get the whole meal in one.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's kind of but yeah, we had some absolutely delicious Cornish pasties when we were back last year, that's for sure.
Well, my husband loves a little bakery at a village called St Agnes in Cornwall, and he swears by the sausage rolls and Cornish pasties from there that they're really good. But he did really, really like this one that he had at Gunwharf Quays in Portsmouth. And so I think this chain seems to have nailed the recipe just right.
Oh, and one thing I have to mention before, because I know I can hear Doug saying it right now, is that what about Marmite? So Marmite is very, very popular. It's absolutely delicious on a hot toast with a bit of butter and then spread the Marmite on. But it really is one of those things where you love it or hate it. So Marmite originates from Branston, which is in the town from where my husband comes from in Staffordshire, Burton-on-Trent.
Oh, is that why he loves it so much?
Well, I think he just loves it anyway, but it was a side product of the brewing industry, which was a feature of Burton-on-Trent. So it comes from there. So we always have Marmite in the cupboard. And when you're in the UK, you really should try Marmite.
Yes.
I know a lot of Australians don't like it because they kind of compare it to Vegemite, and it's very, very different. To me, it tastes very different.
So much better.
It's a lot. I also agree Marmite's a million times better. Controversial. Those Australians who go, no, I can hear them shouting, no, it's not. But you can get amazing Marmite-flavoured things as well. So Marmite-flavoured crisps. So that's nothing in the UK. Get lots of fantastic flavoured crisps. But Marmite-flavoured crisps, Marmite-flavoured biscuits, Marmite-flavoured chocolate even, which Doug really enjoys. So look out for Marmite. So if you're staying in a B&B, you might get Marmite on the breakfast to spread on your toast.
I was just going to say that was really good when we were back staying in hotels here and there. We, like you get your little pots of jam. They do little pots of Marmite. Yeah. So we grabbed a few to keep. So we've got a few to keep us going during the trip. That's
a good idea. Yeah. That's a good idea. Now I'm thinking I want some toast with some Marmite on because I really enjoy it. I think, we'll talk a little bit about puddings as well, because we've kind of talked about, we'll talk about jellied eels actually. So I'm going to mention it because I think, because both myself and Karen are from the north, so we again like talking about these regional variations, and I guess it's a bit, I don't know if it's a bit cliche or a bit, but there's like certain areas that will associate with certain foods, and so jellied eels is kind of a popular. I don't know if it still is, but you can buy it in London, in the East End of London, jellied eels, and there was something else we were talking about before, liquor. Was it
pie mash?
Yeah, with liquor. Yeah. It's not actual liquor, as in it's like a clear liquid, but it's not alcoholic. That you can also get in London. I've never tried that.
Never tried them. We're Northerners. We're not Londoners. That all bypasses us. But the idea of jellied eels just
it doesn't. But I guess I think places in London. I'm going to be doing a food tour in May at Borough Market. So if you're in London. A great place to go and try. I don't know if you can get jellied eels. I just have to tell you this in Borough Market. But Borough Market's a great place to go get all sorts of different foods, British foods, international foods. So that might be a good place to add into your itinerary if you're in London. So we'll talk about puddings because I did mention those. So puddings in the UK, you've got things like Eton Mess, which is a personal favourite of mine, which is basically raspberries, fruit, meringue, wrapped with cream. And it's hugely fattening, but it's absolutely delicious. I would say British puddings are really typified by hot puddings with custard.
I was just going to say, treacle pudding is the first one that came to mind, and apple pie. So again, with that Sunday roast, that would always be accompanied by something like that. My mum would always make a fruit crumble, a pie, or a pudding. That would either be treacle pudding, apple and blackberry pie, something like that, or a rhubarb crumble or something like that.
So my grandmother didn't make those because I don't like any of those. I don't particularly like hot fruit. So we used to have custard with jelly. So she'd make a jelly. We'd choose whichever flavour we wanted for the following week. And then rice pudding with jam, because she used to make her own jam. So we'd have those. But I mean, Doug absolutely loves all those. I call them stodgy puddings, but the kind of hot puddings, you can certainly get them in most places you go. And I know like treacle pudding, spotted dick. There's just roly-poly. There's all sorts of different bread and butter pudding. That's another favorite. Because I don't tend to eat them. I'm more a cold pudding, like trifle, bakewell, tart. I like that sort of thing.
And you can have them served as you like. I don't actually like custard, which is a bit controversial. But you can have them with cream or with ice cream.
Yeah, you
instead.
can.
So especially if you're ordering in a pub, they'll say to you, what do you want with it? You don't have to have it with custard, but that is the traditional way to have it. Yeah,
definitely. And I'll just mention something briefly about food allergies. I don't have any food allergies, but it was something that was mentioned to me by some Americans I was talking to last year. Is that they were quite impressed by how much it is mentioned on menus in the UK about what the ingredients are. So you can check, or they'll ask you if you have got any allergies. So it's worth kind of, if you're going to go to a restaurant for afternoon tea or whatever, to mention that as well. Just bring that up, because I think I know that people have been quite impressed about how seriously it's taken in the UK. So I just did want to mention that, because I can imagine some possibly somebody was thinking about that.
And I think over the last few years it's got more so, because I am intolerant to dairy and just I can have a little bit of it, but not a huge amount of it. But it used to be very hard to get soy milk in different places, and now you find that you can get a variety of options, oat milk and almond milk and all different options when you go to cafes and things, whereas it used to only be more places like Starbucks and things that were more in tune with that kind of thing. But now I feel like when we went back, there was a lot more variety of options.
And then I guess we'll talk about drinks. So yes, I am a typical English in that I love my tea. I can drink potentially, I don't know, I could just drink constantly cups of tea. I like milk in my tea. I don't do cream. I've heard people say that they put cream in their tea, but you wouldn't find that in the UK. So it's a tea bag or tea leaves in Doug's case. I just like normal standard kind of tea, but there's also the different variations of tea when you go over there, but expect that they will ask if you want milk. And obviously coffee. I don't drink coffee, but I know you drink coffee, Karen. So how did you find that in the UK?
I do. I definitely think obviously Australia is better for its coffee. We take it a lot more seriously over here. I know that when I moved to Australia, I found that a bit of a culture shock getting used to ordering coffee over here, because you had to sort of order a flat white or a long black, and there were different words for things. Whereas in a lot of the sort of basic cafes that you've got in the UK, it's a white coffee or a black coffee, which is just, a white coffee is just the hot water and coffee and milk, not like a flat white that's kind of steamed milk. So they're different things. But when we were back, we found that most places now, a lot of them were doing the option of the flat white and the more cappuccinos and more kind of different variations. So it feels like it's really come forward a long way with its coffee.
Yeah.
There was definitely a lot more options over there. But still, if you go to like your kind of greasy spoon cafe or whatever it'll be, do you want milk in it or not?
Yeah, yeah. Basic, yeah, okay. And then, I was just going to mention briefly as well about, because we were asked the other day in the Facebook Live about the difference between a pub and a bar. So pubs, you'll find that a village may have its local village pub, the Red Lion or I can't think, the King's Head, whatever they're called. So there's certain typical names you'll find of pubs. So every village will have its pub, and that tends to be where, the locals will hang out, everybody will know each other. Whereas a bar is a far more kind of, you'd get dressed up to go to a bar, you'd get cocktails in a bar. You wouldn't find a bar in a village. You might find a wine bar in a town, and certainly obviously in places like London or Edinburgh, any of the major cities, you're going to find bars, but you'll also find pubs. And
pubs tend to be where you've got sort of the local community hang out. Like I know my dad would go to the pub to play dominoes or to play darts and things. It's a community gathering place, whereas a bar is more a place that you would meet, drink with friends, to go on somewhere else.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can go into any of them to have food. They still do food in bars as well.
Yeah.
They do food in pubs. You tend to find that the locals in a pub will sit along the bar.
Yes.
Like to chat to the staff that work there, because everyone knows everyone. But you've got usually like a restaurant area in a pub as well, quite often, where you can just sit down and have a meal as well. But sometimes you've got two options. Sometimes you might have a restaurant in the pub, and you might just have a bar menu in the bar side. So the pub might be split into different sections. So you might have different menus in the different sections.
Yeah, absolutely. You might have different bar areas as well inside the pub. That makes sense because we're talking about bars. But yeah, and pubs you can get very friendly, family-friendly pubs as well. So a lot, outdoor beer garden areas so that kids can run around, play. And from age 18 in the UK, you can order and drink alcohol in a pub or bar.
And when we were back, we met people in pubs all the time with our little kids. So your kids can come in with you and eat and have a Coke, whatever, in the bar, and like they can't go up to the bar and actually order a drink themselves, but like they can come and sit in there and have food with you. And as you say, you find some. We just used to Google ahead of time to try and find some that have got like a playground outside, so that when we'd had some food inside, we could go outside and let them burn off a bit of energy and have a play while we caught up with our friends. But pubs are a good meeting place.
Absolutely. So let's think of ways to save a bit of money when you travel around here in your because
don't travel with my husband to see that, because he spent all of the money on all of the foods.
Did he put weight on?
Yes.
Yeah, because I found I did, even though I was doing a lot of walking last year, but I was doing a lot of, because I love afternoon teas, which we haven't talked about, but yeah, I love afternoon tea, which is different from high tea, but I'm not going to go into this.
He actually told my daughter that the water in England shrinks your clothes.
Oh, that's good to know. Actually, I think the water in Australia is shrinking my clothes at the moment. But yeah, so saving money, because I know, I mean, it's something that you go over there with on holiday or what, you don't, it is expensive, so it's worth considering. So one thing that I do recommend is if you consider staying in a B&B or a guest house, because obviously bed and breakfast, you get bed and you get breakfast. So you'll get a full English breakfast the following morning. So that's a good way to set yourself up for the day. So that's what we did a lot of that last year, where we knew that we were going to get a breakfast the following day. And yeah, I think Doug was getting to the point where it's like, not another English breakfast or Scottish breakfast, because it is quite a lot. So you've got to kind of consider that. But it is a good way to save a bit of money. Another good thing to do is to consider going into some of the supermarkets and getting a meal deal. So basically you get a sandwich, piece of fruit, packet of crisps, chocolate bar, and a drink. So one of those, so the sandwich, and then you'll get a choice between the fruit or the chocolate or the crisps, and then a drink. Again, choice. And then they're around about, I think they were about £4 last year, but you need to look at the different supermarkets that you go into, or you go to things like Tesco Express. So they're the smaller versions of the big supermarkets in the UK.
And if you're on the high street, you can nip into a lot of the shops like Boots and things,
yeah.
have got them.
Yeah. So that's a really good way to save a bit of money, because you can get a sandwich. Again, Greg's Bakery is a great place to go and buy yourself a sausage roll or a Cornish pasty. And they also do sandwiches in there as well. So they're reasonably priced. And then I know you were talking about kids eating free, Karen.
Yeah, we managed to try and do that where we could, but although the boys are now getting to that age where they want adult meals.
Yeah, and crumbs.
They want steaks and things like that. So they were getting more expensive as we travelled around. But where we could, we tried to do the meal deals. So some different restaurants and pubs and things did a deal where if you ate on a certain time with one adult meal, you'd sometimes get a kids meal for free. So that saved a little bit of money. But yeah, we ended up sort of mixing and matching what we were doing. I think sometimes it means travel. It means going into the pub at sort of a slightly different time, perhaps when you were going to go. So I think times of things were like you had to eat before 6 o'clock in the evening or something, so you'd have to time your visit a bit earlier than you might have wanted to go. But if it saves you some money for the meal, and it was worth doing sometimes.
Okay, and that's a good thing to know. And also, I'm just going to quickly mention, because it just popped in my head as well, that there are a lot of chain restaurants in the UK as well. So you've got places like Pizza Hut, Nando's, Wagamama's. I think
Pizza Hut's good for an all-you-can-eat Pizza Hut buffet, which is my husband's favourite thing to do with the kids. And where you just go and you pay a fee and you just stack up your plate over and over and over again.
And Nando's, which is a favourite of myself and Doug. So you get a chicken with different coatings and chips, and they do a really nice minty piece, because I love the piece. So we actually were travelling around the country, going to every Nando's in every city that we went to.
To try where the best minty piece were.
And then there's Wagamama's. There's quite a few. I did take some photos of different menus, so I might actually put those in the Facebook group. So if you're not in our Facebook group, pop over, and I'll put some in the show notes as well.
And there's some good Italian chains as well. We like that, because you can't...
Prezzo, yeah.
You know kind of what you're going to get, Zzz's.
Yes.
You know what you're going to get when you go to them. And if sort of you've had a good meal at one of them, and I know our kids sometimes, if they'd had some meals that they didn't enjoy, you at least knew you were going to get a good meal if you went back to one of the chain restaurants. So it's good to mix and match it and do a bit of everything, but sometimes you just want a bit of comfort food that you kind of recognise.
Yeah, definitely. And then I guess my last tip would be is just to book. So book ahead if you want. You don't necessarily need to if you're going into a pub, restaurant, but if you're going into on a Sunday, I would still check. But do try and make reservations. I say this based on the fact Doug and I were in the Isle of Skye last May and really struggled in Portree to actually get somewhere to eat because we hadn't made reservations. So it's a good idea. The same, actually, we're in York. We're in York over the Jubilee celebrations last June, and we had booked the first night. We didn't book the second night. We actually met up with some lovely people from our group, and we went out for dinner with them. And we were actually very lucky to get into the Guy Fawkes Inn, because that was a Thursday night, which was a public holiday. I don't know how, it was a bit of a miracle actually, because we went in and they were like, yes, we've got a table, because there were 6 of us, but we did manage to get in. But I wouldn't take a chance like that, I guess is what I'm saying. So if you are, and I have got a list of different places to eat in the different travel guides to the different destinations in the UK on the website, so you can check that out. And I'm actually adding more. The more research I do, the more I'm adding in various places, but so you can get the details from there and make reservations.
And sometimes you just phoning up a couple of hours ahead is enough. It depends on how popular the place is. Like if it's a really unique place, that like somewhere like the Magpie Cafe or something at Whitby, you need to kind of lock that in earlier rather than later. But then you might just kind of be sitting one afternoon and think, oh, let's go to this pub for dinner. Just ring up and see if we need to book for in a couple of hours from now.
Yeah, I'll go online and check. I think it's always worth checking. I know, even in Edinburgh, we went to Macca's Gourmet Mash Bar, which we always do. It was Sunday evening, and Doug had actually walked up Arthur's Seat, which I didn't do. And then I went to the restaurant, and we managed to get a table for 2 we hadn't booked. And actually, they were turning people away after that. So, asking, have you got a reservation? So I think very much so the weekend or during school holidays, public holidays, really consider about making bookings, or particular where there's not as many restaurants, places like the Isle of Skye, really consider where you're going to eat.
And consider timings of when you're going to eat too, because it depends where you are as to how late restaurants and pubs will stay open and keep serving. So like a pub will stay open late, but it's not always got the kitchen open to serve you food till the pub closes. So they might close the kitchen at 9 o'clock or 8:30 if it's a quiet night or something like that. So it's always worth kind of thinking where you're going to be, because somewhere more rural, somewhere more villagey is going to shut sooner than London. You're going to be able to eat much later in London, but in somewhere more quiet you won't be able to.
Or they might close the kitchen for part of the afternoon, reopen later on in the day. So that's worth considering. Obviously, like takeaways as well often open around about 5:30. So kind of just bear that in mind. But otherwise, I think we've done a fairly good job. I'm going to go make some toast with Marmite now.
Hang on, are we going to talk about bread and different works of bread?
Are.
This was a controversial thing that came up in the group the other day we were looking at.
Yes. So we're talking about the fact that there are different words for bread rolls in the UK. So I call it a bread, a bap. So I would have a sausage bap, or what is it you call it from?
So I'm from Sheffield.
Yeah.
And they call a bread roll a bread cake.
Right.
Bread cake, one word. And my friend, my old housemate, 20 odd years ago, moved from Newcastle to Sheffield and moved into our shared house. And we went to a baker's, and they asked her whether she ordered a sandwich, and they said, do you want it on a bread cake, love? And she went, oh, cake. Did you want it on a bread cake? And she was so baffled. I think she kind of walked out just not knowing what to do.
I don't want on cake, thank you very much. So you might hear bap, cob, bun, barm cake, which
is a Manchester one.
Yeah. Batch, muffin. And I'm going to mention a stotty, because this is definitely a northeastern thing. So a stotty is a bread roll, but it's kind of big and flat. I really enjoy them. So if you go into Greg's Bakery when you're in the northeast, chances are you'll see that they have stotties filled with things like cheese and onion filling, which is delicious. So you'll find those there. Another difference you'll find is actually sometimes in pronunciation as well. So I say scone.
And I say scone.
So we're both kind of northern, but I'm more northern
than me.
So I'm more northern than Karen.
I'm a little bit more Midlandy, really.
Yeah. Though Doug says scone.
Does he?
Yes,
okay.
Doug says scone.
My grandma used to say scone, actually.
Yeah, so you'll find that in the north we'll say scone. The further south you go, at some point there'll be a change.
Well, this is interesting, because I was having this discussion. We were talking about this podcast last night, and Matt said to me that he has always said scone.
Yeah.
And he now says scone because I say scone.
Really?
So he's from the south coast.
And I always associate scone as quite a posh kind of southern.
Being from South Yorkshire, so posh.
So I don't know. So it's interesting. So you know, whatever you ask for, if you ask for a scone or a scone, people will know what you mean.
And there's plenty of pronunciation differences just in general, not just about food. Just as you go around, you'll hear lots of different dialects as you go.
But that's
podcast for another day.
I was going to say that's a whole other podcast because that toasted Marmite is calling my name, Karen. Okay, so I'm just going to say again, a huge thank you to Karen for agreeing to do another chat and podcast and chat about food. There'll be lots of information in the show notes of this episode about the different foods that we mentioned and the different places you can find those foods and the tips that we've shared. But for now, I just want to say thanks so much to Karen for coming on.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me again. It's always good fun.
Cheers, Karen. You can find the information about everything we chatted about in today's episode at uktravelplanet.com/episode 38. That just leaves me to say until next week, happy UK travel planning.